Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. Let's dive deep into the Maharshi's teachings. If you brought a copy of talks with you this evening, we'll take up on dialogue number 273. Dr. Sayed asked, I have been reading the 5 hymns. I find that the hymns are addressed to Arunachala by you. You are an Advaitin. How do you then address God as a separate being? The Maharshi replies, the devotee, God, and the hymns are all the self. The disciple asked, but you are addressing God. You are specifying this Arunachala hill as God. The Maharshi replies, you identify the self with the body. Should not the devotee identify the self with Arunachala? The disciple then said, if Arunachala be the self, why should it be specially picked out among so many other hills? God is everywhere. Why do you specify him as Arunachala? The Maharshi replies, what has attracted you from Allahabad to this place? What has attracted all these people around? The disciple said, Sri Bhagavan. The Maharshi replies, how was I attracted here? By Arunachala. The power cannot be denied. Again, Arunachala is within and not without. The self is Arunachala. The disciple said, several terms are used in the holy books, Atman, Paramatman, Para, etc. What is the gradation in them? The Maharshi replies, they mean the same to the user of the words, but they are understood differently by persons according to their development. The disciple asked, but why do they use so many words to mean the same thing? The Maharshi replies, it is according to circumstances. They all mean the self. Para means not relative or beyond the relative. That is to say, the absolute. The disciples asked, should I meditate on the right chest in order to meditate on the heart? The Maharshi replies, the heart is not physical. Meditation should not be on the right or the left. Meditation should be on the self. Everyone knows I am. Who is the I? It will be neither within nor without, neither on the right nor on the left. I am, that is all. The heart is the center from which everything springs. Because you see the world, the body, and so on, it is said that there is a center for these, which is called the heart. When you are in the heart is known to be neither the center nor the circumference. There is nothing else. Whose center could it be? The disciple then asked, may I take it that the self and the non-self are like substance and its shadow? The Maharshi replies, substance and shadow are for the one who sees only the shadow and mistakes it for the substance and sees its shadow also. But there is neither substance nor shadow for the one who is aware only of the reality. The disciple then said, Buddha, when asked if there is the ego, was silent. When asked if there is no ego, he was silent. Asked if there is God, he was silent. And asked if there is no God, he was silent. Silence was his answer to all these. Mahayana and Hinayana schools have both misinterpreted his silence because they say he was an atheist. If he was an atheist, why should he have spoken of nirvana, of births and deaths, of karma, reincarnations, and dharma? His interpreters are wrong. Is it not so? The Maharshi replies simply, you are right. Let's go back to the beginning of the dialogue. The first question was, I've been reading the 5 hymns. It's the Maharshi's 5 hymns to Arunachala. I find that the hymns are addressed to Arunachala. Of course, what else would 5 hymns to Arunachala be addressed to? You are an Advaitin. How do you then address God as a separate being? The question presupposes that duality is intrinsic to bhakti, but it is not so, no more than it is intrinsic to jnana, knowledge. The Maharshi replies, the devotee, God, and the hymns are all the self. If the devotee sees his nature as the self, the rest, God and the hymns, will be clear. If the devotee regards himself as an embodied separate individual, then duality will appear, God will seem to be otherwise, and the hymns and everything else will seem to be otherwise. What is the nature of the devotee? If you are devoted, to what are you devoted? It is not different than your nature. What is your nature? If we take the devotee in his answer to refer to the Maharshi, well, Sri Bhagavan, having no false sense of individuality, is completely and perfectly just the one absolute self. That self is alone the nature of God. And for one who knows himself as the self, there is nothing but the self. So the hymns also are just the self. For the jnani who sees the truth, the one who is devoted, the devotion, that to which he is devoted, and the expressions of his devotion are all one and the same thing. One indivisible, perfect fullness of existence. The next question, though, was, but you are addressing God. You are specifying this Arunachala hill as God in the hymns such as indicated. The Maharshi replies, you can identify the self with the body. Should not the devotee identify the self with Arunachala? To identify the self with Arunachala causes no problem. To identify the self with the body causes a problem. That problem is called delusion. It is the substance of samsara, the repetitive cycle of birth, death, and illusion. First, one should cease to misidentify the self with the body. Then the nature of God, Arunachala, the self, will be clear. If you are not the body, what is the self? If you are not the body or an embodied being, who is God? If you approach from the position of a body, Arunachala seems like a hill. If you are not the body, not located in a body, what and where is Arunachala? He will state it explicitly later in the dialogue. The next question was, if Arunachala be the self, why should it be specially picked out among so many other hills? God is everywhere. Why do you specify him as Arunachala? The Maharshi replies, what has attracted you from Allahabad to this place? What has attracted all these people around? The answer is, from the disciple, Sri Bhagavan. The Maharshi says, how was I attracted here? By Arunachala. The power cannot be denied. So what is it that is this power? What is the all-attracting power? It bubbles up in one as the search for happiness. What is that attracting power? For those who recognize what the source of happiness is, it turns them in the direction of devotion and knowledge. What is that attracting power? The Maharshi says, again, Arunachala is within and not without. The self is Arunachala. The self is that infinite, immeasurable, eternal source of all happiness. Its very nature is bliss, being and consciousness, Satchidananda, being, consciousness, bliss. For the devotee, the form that his devotion takes leads him straight to that Satchidananda, that unformed being, consciousness, bliss. From the perspective of the embodied individual, it seems as if one is worshiping something else. But the actual experience of profound devotion is quite otherwise. In it is the dissolution of all differences. Again, Arunachala is within and not without. The self is Arunachala. The disciple's next question was, several terms are used in the holy books. Atman, meaning self, Paramatman, supreme self, Para, the supreme, or the absolute, etc. What is the gradation in them? The Maharshi replies, they mean the same to the user of the words, but they are understood differently by persons according to their development. The disciple asked, but why do they use so many words to mean the same thing? The Maharshi replies, it is according to circumstances. They all mean the self. Para means not relative, or beyond the relative, that is to say, the absolute. What then is absolute? If something is absolute, it is invariable. If it is absolute, it is without beginning or end. If it is absolute, it is not dependent on anything else to exist. If it is absolute, it is not in relation to anything else. That is, the absolute is the solitary, only existence, the only reality. The reality cannot be said to be in relation to the unreal. That which is so real, that which is absolute, is the Atman or Supreme Atman, the real self within you. This real self is immutable, invariable, eternal, unborn, imperishable, and not in relation to anything else, be it the world, the body, the senses, the mind, or even the notion of individual existence. It does not depend on anything else in order to be. It is, and it is just as it is always. Whether it is called Atman, Paramatman, Para, or by any other term, it should be realized conclusively as the very nature of your being, the only self that there is. For this, deeply inquire, who am I? The next question from the disciple was, should I meditate on the right chest in order to meditate on the heart? The Maharshi explains to him, the heart is not physical. Meditation should not be on the right or the left. Meditation should be on the self. Everyone knows I am. Who is the I? It will be neither within nor without, neither on the right nor on the left. I am. That is all. The self is not physical. It is the self itself that is called the heart, the quintessential being. It is not physical. It is not bodily. Meditation, similarly, is not a bodily experience. Everyone knows I am. That is, everyone has the sense of existence. That sense of existence is not within the body. It's not outside the body either. It is absolute, para, not in relation to a body at all. It is entirely bodiless. So how can there be any conception of higher, lower, right, left, inside, outside, in relation to this existence? Everyone knows I am. Who is the I? I am. That is all. To realize the nature of your very existence is to realize absolute truth. And the nature of the one who so realizes is that. Everyone knows I am. Who is the I? Abandon any tendency to misidentify your very nature, your existence, with the body. Without a body, what attributes do you have? You are attributeless. No up, down, no in or out, right or left, active, inactive, and so forth and so on. Realize your being as bodiless. You know that you exist. Inquire to know the nature of that existence. The Maharshi continues to explain. He says, the heart is the center from which everything springs. Because you see the world, the body, and so on, it is said that there is a center for these, which is called the heart. When you are in the heart is known to be neither the center nor the circumference. There is nothing else. Whose center could it be? If we perceive the world and the body and so forth, there is some center for all this. This, he says, is called the heart. Heart means hridayam. This is the center. Some center from which all appearance springs, to which it returns, upon which it depends. What is that center? It is your very existence that appears as the center of all. When you are in the heart, that is, when you abide as the self, in the knowledge of the self, that the self alone is what you are, and not a world or body and so on and so forth. When you are in the heart is known to be neither the center nor the circumference. Where the notions of I and this have disappeared, how could there be a center and a circumference? There is no subject, no object, just one illimitable, homogeneous existence, without name, without form. If we think there is all, then it is the heart of all. If there is no notion of all, even the idea of a center or heart no longer applies. There is nothing else. Whose center could it be? The one self alone exists eternally. If we think that there is something else, who is it that is assumed to be the experiencer of that something else? If that assumption subsides by profound inquiry, the one undifferentiated existence, the self, Brahman, alone remains. Having heard this instruction from Sri Bhagavan, the disciple, trying to grasp the meaning of it, asks, may I take it that the self and the non-self are like substance and shadow? That is, the self is the substance, and the non-self or the illusion is its shadow. But the Maharshi explains to him, substance and shadow are for the one who sees only the shadow and mistakes it for the substance and sees its shadow also. The substance and shadow, the idea that there's a reality and an illusion, are for one who sees only the shadow, is for one who sees only the illusion and not the reality as it is, and mistakes it for the substance. That is, he takes the unreal to be real and sees its shadow also. That is, the view of what is real is unreal. Substance and shadow are for the one who sees only the shadow. The shadow, it is all duality, the concepts of I, and this which depends upon it, and mistakes it for the substance, mistaking that illusion of I and this for the substance, for reality, and sees its shadow also. It is illusion upon illusion, dream within dream. But, he says, there is neither substance nor shadow for the one who is aware only of the reality. One who is aware of the reality is himself the reality, without the least trace of the supposition of being an individual. If the individual or ego is not, then everything that is for that ego also is not. The reality is para, the absolute, not in relation to anything else. It is not like a substance and a shadow. The reality is undifferentiated, absolutely indivisible. In that, for that, there is nothing else. To see this is clear wisdom, is self-knowledge. To realize this knowledge, inquire, find out who you are. The last question in the dialogue concerned the state of the Buddha, mentioning that he was silent when asked if there was an ego, if there was no ego, if there was God, if there was not God. He was silent for all of that. So apparently, at least according to the questioner, some have misinterpreted that silent answer as indicative of atheism. But he points out, how could he have been an atheist if he spoke of nirvana, of births and deaths, of karma, reincarnations, and dharma? His interpreters are wrong, is it not so? The Maharshi replies, you are right. If a great sage has answered a question, perhaps it is with words, perhaps it is with silence, as in the case here of the Buddha, Dakshinamurti, of Ramana himself. How is one to interpret those words, or how is one to interpret the silence? If one interprets in a manner that it makes the instruction or the silence accord with one's preconceptions, what good is it? It is bound to be a misinterpretation. How can one interpret correctly? Only by abiding in that state from which the words or silence emanates. How else to abide in that state except by knowing oneself in truth? Whenever for yourself you attempt to interpret a spiritual instruction, do not attempt to drag the instruction down to the present level of conception, but seek to erase the conceptions in your mind and lift your own state to that which is being indicated in the instruction.
It feels like I still misidentify with the body. And when I try to take apart what I think that misidentification is, like I have a memory of walking this afternoon and thinking that I went on a walk, like I went somewhere. So if I try to look at what is that thing made up of, that misidentification, I'm not really quite sure what it is or why I'm even making that mistake of connecting myself with a concept of a body or the body sensations themselves, like it's something that is either happening to me or I'm actually those sensations.
One makes a mistake, adheres to the ignorance, only because he doesn't know it's a mistake. If he really knew it as ignorance, it would cease to exist. How can you be the body that was walking this afternoon? What makes you assume you were in it? Or that you were it?
When you start that question, it's kind of like, I don't even know what in it actually is. It's some ideas kind of cobbled together, sensations that repeat themselves. And
well, the sensations themselves don't give rise to the illusion of being a body or being in a body.
No, they're not saying, this is who you are.
So the body itself does not have the misidentification. And the activity of the senses do not necessarily promote that misidentification.
So who's got the misidentification? It's not the...
Even if we take that approach, the one who has the misidentification cannot possibly be a body. So even one who would be ignorant would not be a body. How much more so is this the case with one who is wise? But where is the connection between the self and the body? Due to that presumed connection, so that one thinks he is the body or he's in the body, based upon that is the idea that one undergoes all kinds of experiences and that one is existing in a world. It's one assumption piled on top of another.
The shadow of the substance of the shadow of the...
Which is viewed from standing in the shadow, as explained by the Maharshi, and thinking it's the substance. But ask yourself, in what way are you the body?
Well, I can see that I'm not the sensations, that's for sure. And I can see that I'm not like the subtle concept of the body. But I can't see how I'm making some connection with those objects in myself. I don't even know why I'm doing that for sure.
Because you're in quest of your identity. Only you don't find it that way. What do you know of your body except by the sensations? If you would eliminate the sensations, seeing, hearing, touching, etc., what would remain of the experience of your body?
There would be nothing to base it on. It would be gone.
And you say that you recognize that you're not the sensations.
Maybe I don't. Or only partially think that I do.
The wise declare that you are neither the body nor the senses.
Well, that must keep me out of the wise category.
We'll set that aside for now. More important to focus on whether your nature is to be defined in bodily terms in any manner whatsoever.
Well, it just brings me back then to ask the question, well then, who am I if I'm not those body sensations?
That's just the thing to know. The body and the senses are something that are known. Who is the knower? The knower can never be the known. The consciousness that knows the body cannot possibly be the body, nor can it contain the attributes of the body, such as active and inactive, living and dead, etc. Without the misidentification with the body, the idea of being located somewhere, taking a walk somewhere, is seen to be a mere illusion appearing in you, and not you in it. The body is the known, the self is the knower. How can there be an identification of the two? The body undergoes birth and death, does not exist before birth, does not exist after death. Your existence, the self, is birthless and deathless. There never was a time when it was not. You cannot imagine a time when it ceases. So how can there be an identification of the self with the body? The body is changing all the time. The self, your very being, is ever changeless. So how can there be an identification of the self with the body? The body is a limited, inert form. The self is of the nature of illimitable existence consciousness. So how can there be an identification of the self with the body?
Well, I can follow what you're saying to some degree. The logic of it is clear, but the experience of it is not fully there for me. It's...
What is your experience?
The experience is like a subtle individual in some kind of a subtle body. The gross sensations I seem to be able to not misidentify with.
What constitutes the subtle body? In what manner does it appear?
It actually doesn't appear in the sensations. It seems to appear in the mind as a concept that's kind of roughly associated with the sensations. It seems to be... I don't know that I even need to have the sensations to have that concept. So I think it's more with some subtle concept that it's...
Just as you have a body in a dream without the sensations, without the physical sensations. And is that subtle body idea, is it with you always?
No, it's kind of coming and going all the time. A lot of times it's just not there. If I go to sleep, it's not there.
It comes and goes. But you don't come and go.
No, I never have that experience of coming and going. Not I.
So why identify the one with the other?
I asked that earlier, and I posed that question earlier. Why am I doing this? And you said it's because you're looking for yourself, but you're looking in the wrong place. And so I asked myself, why are you looking in the wrong place? What connection am I still making with something that is the wrong place to be looking? I must have something in the body that I think is either attached to my happiness or I've got some existence connected with that stuff.
In quest of existence or reality, or knowledge of it, in quest of your identity, in quest of happiness, these amount to the same thing.
I've made attempts.
Why are you taking the body to be yourself? The answer can only be ignorance, delusion. Then what are you going to do about that delusion? Because if we ask, why is there illusion or delusion, we would have to say that it's another delusion. The delusion that there is delusion.
That it's actually real?
Yes.
Existent? Yes.
So then what is to be done? Dissolve the delusion. Dive deep within, following the trail of your own existence, your sense of identity, the I-ness to its source. If you turn within in this manner, you will find your being to be utterly bodiless. Not a subtle body, not a gross body. Not the form of the body, not the sensations. You know that you exist always. This subtle body idea is not always. Trace the always existing sense of identity to its source. It is not an object, like the body.
Yeah, it starts to get clearer when I look at what is always and what is coming and going. That helps to start breaking it up, the connection. Because if I think about the memory of the day, there's a lot of parts in it where there is no memory of the body or being misidentified with it. I mean, if we're talking about the day, there's already daily life, but I'm trying to use it as a way of seeing. There's a lot of times where I don't even have that experience. But I always had the experience through the whole day that I was always there, whatever was going on.
And what is the nature of that I that was always there? It's not the body, and it's not the memory. Because the memory isn't always there. What is it that is always existing? It's neither the body nor the mind. Trace this inward and take away from it every idea that is not actually it.
kind of run out of ideas is what happens.
That's good. Pursue this very experientially. It does no good to say, I am not the body, if you still think, I am the body. For freedom from the illusions of birth and death, you have to really know your bodiless being as it is. You have to know it so deeply that the knowledge is identical with your present knowledge of I exist. Depth of this knowledge is realizable by consistent, ego-destroying inquiry. For it is the ego notion, as Sri Bhagavan points out, that ties the self, which is of the nature of pure being, consciousness, bliss, with a body. Inquiry destroys the false objectification, thinking of yourself as something objective, and destroys the I notion that's at the center of that. It destroys such because they are unreal. The inquiry simply reveals what is true about you. And what is true about you is certainly no mere body.
So what's clear in my experience now is I didn't actually go for a walk today. There's an idea of somebody in a body that did that, but...
And that's just an idea. When all ideas are abandoned, the self is known as it is. You are not the body that went walking. What are you?
I can see that I'm not an I that went for a walk in the body today. That's really kind of a... I don't think I see it fully enough, but I can see it to some degree that to go for a walk, you got to think you're somebody in a body.
Likewise is it with the connection with any action. To think you're the performer of any action entails thinking you're a body. If you know the self, you find it to be unmoving and never doing anything, even in the midst of the body moving and doing.
that gives me a glimpse of the freedom that one would have not being the body.
There is immense freedom. It's found by the dissolution of the ego notion and the I am the body misconception. This freedom is actually innate, and the bondage is merely an illusion. You've got to find this out for yourself through interior direct experience. For that, inquire.